So, greetings, friends. Today's podcast is on a sutta called the Meghiya Sutta. This is a sutta where the Buddha is fine-tuning a monk, fine-tuning his understanding, who's gotten a little bit lost in his assessment of himself. And this is something we can easily fall into, especially when we're not part of a well-focused Sangha, and we may be trying to incorporate other teachings into our Dhamma practice. And I'm referring to modern Buddhist teachings that don't completely coincide with what the Buddha taught. Meghiya was spending a good deal of time in his practice and meditating in seclusion. And he found himself still overwhelmed by sensual thoughts, even malevolent thoughts or cruel thoughts of others would arise in his mind. And he couldn't quite get a grasp of why his practice wasn't eliminating these. And the Buddha brings up a very important point. It's the proper application of mindfulness. So let me read a little bit of the sutta and I'll comment as we go along. Meghiya seeks out the Buddha one afternoon. Reverend teacher, I continue to be troubled by sensual thoughts, by malevolent thoughts, and by cruel thoughts. The Buddha responds, Meghiya, when your mindfulness is not fully refined, still immature, there are 5 qualities that develop full maturity in the cessation of troubling qualities of mind. So that refined mindfulness is a reference to learning and understanding what is most important to hold in mind. Mindfulness means to recollect or to hold in mind. So we can hold anything in mind. And in that sense, even hurtful thoughts or malevolent thoughts or thoughts of continued sensory indulgence, those are hurtful thoughts, even though it's an aspect of mindfulness there. So the refined mindfulness that the Buddha refers to is the refined mindfulness that is framed by the Eightfold Path. The Buddha taught mindfulness in the Satipatthana Sutta and other suttas, but always in that same context. And in that sutta, he teaches the 4 frames of references, the 4 foundations of mindfulness that are primarily used during meditation and deepen concentration. And then he expands that out to the 7 contemplations that we should endeavor applying mindfulness to the 5 hindrances, applying mindfulness to the 5 clinging aggregates, and finally applying mindfulness to the 4 noble truths. That's a series that we happen to be going through on my Saturday class, and the first talk was this past Saturday, and that talk, and there's an article related on the website too, on the Satipatthana Sutta, and that relates to that, the very specific way that the Buddha taught mindfulness. So the Buddha continues in this sutta. The first quality to develop are skillful and honorable friends and associations. Avoid unskillful, distracting, and troubling associations. And that's a common underlying theme in the Buddha's teachings. Who we associate with and what we associate with is going to determine, to a great extent, the experience of our life. And association is simply another word for joining with or clinging to. And this doesn't mean that we should be hyper-judgmental about who we encounter and who we spend time with in our lives. But the significant associations that we have in our life will, to a great extent, determine the quality of our life, and certainly will determine the development of our Dhamma practice. If we are associating with people whose Dhamma practice is not really well focused and kind of includes everything under the sun, which is what a lot of so-called spiritual practice is today, these may be very, very wholesome associations, meaning that the people are well intended. But if we're trying to incorporate every type of spiritual or New Age or even neo-Buddhist idea, we're going to be distracted by what's most important and what the Buddha taught, and especially using mindfulness to be mindful of the Eightfold Path as the framework for our practice. And so here the Buddha is fine-tuning Meghiya in this way. The second quality to develop is restraint in contact, avoiding the danger and even the slightest transgressions. Train yourself to keep all the precepts and to practice right speech, right action, and right livelihood. There's a direct reference to using the Eightfold Path. The third quality to develop is speech that is effacing and that does not promote the ego self. Effacing speech relaxes the mind and conduces towards dispassion, peace, direct knowledge, and unbinding, and enlightenment. It conduces towards awakening. And so if we notice that in our speech, there's a lot of I want this, and I think this, and I feel this way, we know that that's not effacing speech. We're using our words and probably following actions to continue to establish an ego self. Right speech is probably the entry point for many, many people into looking at conceit and looking at I-making. The Buddha continues, the fourth quality to develop is energy and right effort for abandoning unwholesome qualities and developing wholesome qualities of mind. Be vigorous and persevering with regard to wholesome qualities. And again, what are those wholesome qualities? They are informed by right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And then they are fine-tuned through developing right view and right intention and the concentration factors of right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation, shamatha vipassana meditation. The fifth quality to develop is wisdom born of penetrative knowledge of the arising and passing away of suffering, knowledge with regard to the Four Noble Truths. And this last directly relates to the Buddha's teachings in the Satipatthana Sutta. In that sutta, he relates mindfulness ultimately to that aspect of recognizing in a moment by moment way, as our life unfolds, the arising and passing away of all phenomena, but then most specifically, the arising and passing away of our thoughts, and especially self-referential thoughts. That relates directly to meditation. And in our meditation, as we're being mindful of our breath, if we make the right connection to our breath, we're noticing the arising and the passing away of our breath, and in that way, the arising and passing away of all phenomena. In other words, the in-breath is the arising, and the out-breath is the passing away. And that's such a subtle but very, very powerful teaching on impermanence. And if you look at the Four Noble Truths in relation to the three marks of existence, to impermanence, the not self-characteristic, and resulting dukkha, the Four Noble Truths addresses those directly to bring a profound understanding of the interplay, but also so that we can bring cessation to the origination of suffering, which is craving and clinging. And in a general overall way, the Four Noble Truths speak most profoundly to impermanence, because it speaks to the impermanence of recognizing what is occurring in this moment, the confusion, delusion, and suffering that follows from ignorance of Four Noble Truths, and the cessation of the renunciation of that craving and clinging. That's really what the purpose of the Four Noble Truths is about. The Buddha continues, when mindfulness is still unrefined and immature, these are the five qualities to develop that lead directly to full maturity, to awakening. It is to be expected, Meghiya, that one who has skillful friends and associations, that they will be restrained in conduct and follow the precepts. Again, the influence of our associations, particularly in a sangha, and to use the term broadly, in a spiritual association, meaning a sangha, if that sangha is well focused, it will support developing restraint and conduct. We've just gone through a series of 4 talks on our Tuesday night sangha, and those talks are on the just posted on the website too, under Wisdom of Restraint. And in those 4 suttas, the Buddha speaks directly to how important it is to practice restraint in all areas of our life, but particularly in our associations. We cannot hope to develop the Dhamma if we're associating in a significant way. I'm not talking about going to the Thursday night bowling league, or who we play golf with, or who we might play cards with, etc., or maybe our dining club. Although we should look at those associations, especially who we're associating with as part of our Dhamma practice, is so important. I'm going to read that line again. One who has skillful friends and associates, will be restrained in conduct and follow the precepts. The precepts are to refrain from taking life, refrain from taking what is not freely given, refrain from sexual misconduct, refrain from wrong speech, and refrain from the use of intoxicants. Every one of those, probably not the first one, but maybe even in subtle ways, to me, gossip, an aspect of wrong speech, is an aspect of taking someone's life. You're taking their dignity away that way. But the other ones can certainly be influenced by our associations, and it's easy to fall into the excuse that, well, all my friends are doing such and such, I might as well just follow. And again, even in the most subtle ways, the Buddha talks about, and he mentioned it earlier in this sutta, even the most minor transgression has devastating results ultimately. The Buddha continues, one who has skillful friends will have the energy and effort to abandon unwholesome qualities and develop wholesome qualities. One who has skillful friends will be wise, born of penetrative knowledge of the arising and passing away of suffering. Again, a reference to the impermanence of all things, the arising and the passing away. One of our Sangha members brought up such an important point last night. Lorna, thank you, Lorna. That she has no trouble noticing the arising, meaning the anticipation of what may be coming, but she does not ever notice the passing away. And if you are only forward focused, meaning your thoughts are only about the future, what's coming, you're really missing the half of your life, because half of our life is the passing away of phenomena that we're experiencing it. And recognizing that, again, being mindful of the 4 foundations of mindfulness as the Buddha teaches them in relation to meditation practice. In the very first foundation, he talks about being mindful of the arising and passing away of our breath. And if we can do that in meditation, we can take that off our cushion and start applying that to all phenomena, the arising and the passing away of everything that's occurring to us. So it's not just what's coming. In fact, our mind should be focused on the present. And if we have developed a refined mindfulness through the Eightfold Path, we will be mindful of the arising and the passing away as one cycle. There won't be any separation in our minds to, oh, this is what's coming up and this is what has passed. We'll be mindful of being directly involved in that cycle. Let me read that line again. One who has skillful friends will be wise, born of penetrative knowledge of the arising and passing away of suffering, knowledge with regard to the 4 Noble Truths. Again, the reference to the 4 Noble Truths as teaching the impermanence. Furthermore, Meghiya, one who has established these 5 qualities should develop 4 additional qualities. Sensual craving should be abandoned. So the Buddha's taking this now one step further. It's not just recognizing sensual craving and the clinging that follows. We should then practice restraint. We should recognize sensual craving and abandon it. And notice that there's no analysis here about where it's coming from or what it's affecting. There's some meditation techniques that get into this in a very detailed way that aren't helpful at all. Simply recognizing that sensual craving has arisen, and as the Buddha would put it, cut it off at the root. Let it go right there at the point of renunciation. And that, because of conditioned thinking, the next moment may bring the same sensual craving. And again, not that it wasn't effective in the first place. Because of conditioned thinking, we will likely have to continue that process for a while until eventually the self-referential ego self will relent and stop trying to create that same scenario. Metta, or goodwill, or loving kindness, should be cultivated. It's such a powerful way of developing the essence of being restrained is to not get involved in negative thoughts towards others or towards ourselves. Mindfulness of the breath should be maintained to interrupt discursive and conditioned thinking, meaning moment by moment, we should be also mindful of the breath, which will bring us into what's occurring in this present moment. Impermanence should be fully understood. To cease I-making, or conceit is another word for that, and understand the not-self characteristic. So here in this last line, the Buddha's bringing together the three marks of existence. When the interplay between impermanence and not self, between anicca and anatta, I-making or selfing or conceit is abandoned and suffering ends. This is nibbana here and now. What a powerful line there. The Buddha, again, is directly addressing the three marks of existence, which is the underlying understanding that we should be developing through the Eightfold Path. The Buddha concludes this sutta with a verse. Trivial thoughts, subtle thoughts, mental reactions that continue to distract, not understanding conditioned thinking, one wanders endlessly in samsara. And another word for samsara is simply ignorance. Remember, dependent origination states from ignorance through 12 observable causative links, all manner of suffering arises. That's samsara. That's wandering around in ignorance. Understanding the roots of ignorance, the ardent and mindful restrains ignorance. The fully awakened completely abandons ignorance and the mental reactions that would continue to distract. That's the end of the sutta. Let me read that last line. The mental reactions that would continue to distract. The sole purpose of meditation is to develop a well-concentrated mind, supported by the other 7 factors of the Eightfold Path. And the antithesis of a well-concentrated mind is a mind that continues to react, that continues to distract. In that way, and in the sutta, the Buddha brings all of his teachings together in a very direct way, tying together the 3 marks of existence with the 4 noble truths and the proper application of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And ultimately what it is to be mindful of the arising and passing away of all phenomena, but including the phenomena that we think is us. This sense of I-making that we continue moment by moment, trying to establish that which can't be established, that which the Buddha said is anatta, it's not a self. Let go of those views, and those views become much easier to let go of when we recognize that even the views that we're holding of ourselves are, using the Buddha's words, are like foam on the water. There's no substance to them. They simply arise and they pass away. And even the seemingly permanent views that we hold of ourselves are maintained moment by moment. In other words, they arise and they pass away moment by moment. But because of our conditioned thinking and our insistence on maintaining those views, they seem persistent. But in this way, the continuity of views is simply obscuring the underlying impermanence, the arising and the passing away of all views. And at the most subtle level, this is what the Buddha was teaching Meghiya here, to recognize that even those things that were still troubling in his mind, when sensory craving would come up, when malevolent or cruel thoughts would come up, to recognize that even those thoughts are rooted in impermanence. And if we recognize that, this came up last night in the class on restraint in Frenchtown. It's often our thoughts that are associated with other people that we justify. In other words, if we judge someone harshly for one reason or another, even if the judgment might be justifiable, and our minds will continue to try to justify that judgment by continuing harsher judgments. And if we can recognize that a harsh judgment arose of someone else for any reason, it really doesn't matter. And in that moment, practice restraint. In other words, practice the need to justify that feeling or that judgment. We're cutting that judgment off at the root, and we're bringing that to cessation. We're allowing it to pass away gracefully. So that's the talk for today. I'll be back next Wednesday. If you have any questions or comments about this talk, please go onto the website and send me an email. So thank you for joining today. Peace.